In today's video, we're going to look at the impact from a business model and economics point of view for the omni-sentient economy. The impact is far greater than I think most companies, most leaders and companies realize, and it'll be significant shifts that'll take place, not just from a business model point of view, not just from an organizational point of view, not just from a product point of view. It's going to touch the entire business. So today we'll explore that. And what we're going to do in today's video, we're going to cover off firstly, just look at the hyper-connected economy where we are right now, and some of you will recognize where your corporations are, what you're doing well. Then you'll see how we then transition into this new omni-sentient economy and what that means and what are the components in there. And we're going to cover off the different technologies, how the converging components within those technologies will and can disrupt your business. And then from there, we're going to look at the actual phases, right? We'll look at the economic phases and we'll look historically, where they came from, how that influenced our business, and all the way through where we're going to go in the future. But we'll focus on this omni-sentient economy related specifically, how that impact is going to be and what we need to do right now. And from there, we're going to look at who all the key stakeholders are in our companies, from the humans, the AI agents, the infrastructure, and then how those roles will change, and what that means for the company. Then we can look at our organizational structure, where we are right now, and then obviously what the new organizational structure look like, and once again, how that potentially can operate. The actual business models, where we are right now. This is, the hyper-connected economy and the business model attached to it. But once again, I'll walk you through the linear economy all the way from pre-internet and how it transitioned, and that'll give you an idea on the transition and then absolutely what this latest hyper-connected economy and omni-sentient economy business models will look like. And finally, the timelines. The timelines that every company is going to have to manage, all the way from now until 2038 and different components within that. But let's start off with, this global paradigm shift that's ahead of us. It's greater than I think most people imagine, and the impact is going to be much, much bigger. So let's go through that. As we've always said, and those of you who've seen some of my presentations, we have 6 clusters, technology clusters, that are converging, and inside those technology clusters we then have the different technologies. And on this slide you can see we have the 6 clusters and we have 25 technologies inside these clusters that are becoming mature in the next 5 years. I would say maybe 5 to 10 years with some of the more infrastructure specific technologies. The key is AI is only one of those. So, we look at AI and we talk about AI, but the issue is there's 25 of these. And the bigger problem is there's going to be the integration. I'm going to show you an example of that in a second. But just if we look at the top 5 of those 25, AI, robotics, energy storage, DNA sequencing, and blockchain, those 5 alone will go from 13 trillion to 200 trillion by 2030. So that you just think about the impact, just look at that number and the impact on just 5 of those. So imagine all 25 and what the impact is going to be overall on all companies around the world. As I said, the biggest thing is going to be convergence. And when I mean convergence is that traditionally we've been made used to that we work with single technologies, right? We had the computer that came along, and then we had the phone that came along, and we had the internet that came. And as a society, we had time to adjust. We had time to integrate those into our companies, integrate those into our lives. Now we have 25 technologies, and the issue we have is they're converging, which means is the one touches the other one, and the 2 converging technologies will disrupt markets. Example of that is the following. If you look at this drawing on, just the cluster that I'm highlighting on the screen right now, we have 6 of those. Those 6 clusters will totally disrupt the auto industry as we know it today. So what you'll find is this disruption won't just be specific to how the product, i.e. the car, is getting made, but and not just how it's getting sold, but also how we as consumers will buy and utilize those cars. As an example, so in this case, a car manufacturer, let's say Toyota, will go from a company that makes and sells cars to a company that comes and offers you ride share as a client, where they'll say, we'll sell you 500 miles every year or so, or 5,000 miles or whatever that is. But the key is their business models are changing. So as a company, and from a transformation point of view, these clusters are going to force you not just to look at your products, how it's getting made from an efficiency point of view, but actually how it influences your entire value chain up and down, downstream. AI is the biggest impact, right? And I think the biggest thing is most people don't understand the speed of what's happening. I use OpenAI here as an example. In 2023, a year and a half ago, OpenAI had 2 million developers, 100 million weekly users, and 300 million tokens per minute were basically consumed from an energy point of view. If we look at today, 2025, they had 4 million developers, 800 million, or 810 million to be exact, weekly users, and 6 billion tokens are currently being burned. So the volumes are just significantly increasing, and it's super fast. And I'll show you some of these figures a bit later in the presentation as well. So if we look at AI native companies, right, outperforming traditional companies, we see that across the board. And you think about how early this is, right, how early we are in the journey, but we are really starting to see these significant changes. We see that a higher revenue growth, 4.6 times higher revenue growth. We see 3.2 times higher profitability. We see 2.8 times higher organizational productivity and 5.4 times higher enterprise value multiples. So it's across the board. So once again, if a company looks at this, do they have a choice? Short answer, no. So AI becomes a priority. And once again, AI is one of those 25 technologies. So the acceleration, once again, is just huge. This slide, I wanted to highlight this slide. And this just, once again, sort of shows the speed that we're dealing with these days. And I said, we've been used to these single technology transformations. But this is a graphic that shows how long it took a specific application to get to 100 million users on a monthly basis. Google Translate was 78 months. You can see how it gets shorter and shorter and shorter, and ChatGPT took 2 months. And as I just said, 810 million users at the moment on a weekly basis. So the speed is just absolutely tremendous. This is an interesting chart that we see this transition will happen across all industries. And this chart shows at what stage does AI go from a cost center, which means it costs you money to run, to a growth engine, i.e. it becomes a net revenue generator for your company. And we'll see that we have two industries that have passed over already of the 11 industries. And by 2031, they would have all passed over, and construction will be the last one. And with the way we highlight those, the first one is your capital light data heavy industries. Then we're going into your moderate physical industries, and last one to go will be your labor intensive industries. But the key highlight on this slide is that by 2031, they've all passed over. At that stage, AI makes money for you, which means it becomes an economy of scale. The more I put in, the more money it makes. Very, very simple. And then, the key for us as companies is the speed. That's the biggest adjustment for us. AI, and I've written here, AI has erased the old growth curve. We're no longer looking at linear or exponential growth. We're now looking at recursive, right? So we're looking at AI that will learn, improve, and put the next product out there. Learn, improve, put the next product out there. So now you have an industry and a technology that it's learning and self-learning, recursive, and it's just accelerating. So we're not stuck with our traditional slowness as far as humans are concerned. So if we look at then economic phases, right? And this is to contextually show you how we've had the shift over time. So I'll look from linear all the way to the current and where we are going in the future. So if we start with linear, this economy was pretty simple. This was pre-internet, which means is the companies were doing business within region. Their media and marketing was probably around about, advertising was newspapers, radio, and the larger companies was using television, but typically within region or in country, you did your sales. Then the internet or the digital age came. We went analog to digital. We saw the internet that came along, and that started giving us scope beyond our borders, beyond the country. We started to be able to showcase our wares beyond just simple regional geographic limits. That moved us into the social economy. The reason why we highlight the social economy separately, it changed information forever. What I mean by that is, before the social economy came along, all of us got our information either from a newspaper, television, or radio. Now 80% plus of information and news are getting generated by fellow citizens, by people. So it changed the way that information is basically produced and consumed. The next is what we call the collaborative age, and that changed the service industry. So we went from an industry where we started getting information from each other to an industry where we now started getting services from each other. That's your rideshare, Airbnb. And we see that economy is just going to get bigger and bigger as we go through tokenization, accept, which I'll talk about a bit later. That now has led us into where we are now, which is the hyper-connected economy. And the next one will be the machine-to-machine economy. So hyper-connected economy is where everything is connected. Humans are connected with their phones, are connected into systems, and that was the start of the platform economy. Next coming is going to be what we call the machine-to-machine economy, which will be autonomous and driven by intelligence. And this is the next area we're going to focus today. And then next will be augmented well-being or augmented humans. And then lastly will be off-planet. So we know what's coming. The key for us now is this is what we have to figure out. Platform to machine economy, or this omni-sentient economy as we call it. And I'll talk about in a second what I mean by omni-sentient economy. But this is the next thing for companies. This is where we have to look at transform. This will impact us over the next 3 to 4 years, 5 years maybe, where we have to transition our companies, our models, and what's coming. Right. So if we then look at what is the omnisentient economy, omnisentient economy is an economy where intelligence is infused in every component of the world around you, right? So we are matching and we are uniting digital and physical realms into one, and we're putting intelligence inside it. So we move away from a world where we were, responsive to a world where you become predictive. And you'll see when we get to the business models how the digital twin changes its actual function within a company and what that does as we go through that. So if we then look at the hyperconnected economy where we are right now, what are the key components? We have a physical component, a digital component, and then obviously biology. And these were the components inside that. Now, sadly, I have to say, most companies are just touching this hyper-connected economy. The big 7 companies, as we would call them, they are really into these components, and that's why they are significantly showing growth beyond most companies. But this is the current one. So the scary thing here is most people haven't figured this out yet and how to actually take advantage of the hyper-connected economy. And now we're moving into what we call the omnisentient economy. So if we then look at the components on the omnisentient economy, once again, it changes everything. So now we're going to go from an economy where every object, every platform, supply chain, and business model becomes aware, becomes connected, becomes intelligent, becomes autonomous, and coordinated. Now think about those 5 components together and what the impact looks like in your business. How do you operate a business like that? How do you firstly get there? How do you transform your business to become connected, intelligent, aware, and autonomous? And your autonomous component can execute on their own, etc., etc. And I'll show you all that as we go through that. But this is the omnisentient economy. You can see, just looking at these 5, what that impact's going to be on business. But if we look at the framework, then we'll go from AI reasoning systems, which we have to accommodate in our companies, to autonomous clusters, which means we'll have machines and AI agents that will autonomously go and do business with other agents out there in the marketplace. We'll have our machine economy, where we'll have machines that can operate 24/7, producing and with renewable energy at a significant low input cost. Platform as a community, we'll just touch on that, but your platform economy becomes your foundational economy, but your humans will become more and more belong to communities, and that's where we'll monetize. Blockchain and trust value will become the foundation of everything. Your digital currencies, your synthetic biology becomes into play then. From there, we'll move into autonomous, neuro computing human interfaces. You see, we're starting to really get into areas where we have not been to this point. Spatial immersed computing, which is your meta areas, and then obviously everything will be centered around energy, right? So this is the framework. So this is what you look at your company. You say, okay, if I look at my company, which of these components touch me? So do I have physical equipment in my company? How do they become autonomous? How do I put intelligence in there? My people, how do I equip them with more intelligence? And how do I get more proficient? So you look at each of these clusters and saying, what's the impact? What's the convergence? And how does it impact me? And we'll go from there. Right, so now we're going to look at the actual economic frameworks and what that means. So if we go back to this chart, this is where we're going to focus now. How do we go from this hyper-connected economy into this, what we call machine-to-machine economy? So firstly, who's the stakeholders? So the hyper-connected economy, we still have humans in our companies, but now we have to add AI agents, and these agents will become card holding employees in your company. They'll become an employee with an ID in your company. And then you'll have your infrastructure, which will become smart with intelligence, which means they can operate by themselves without permission. So the key is, how do I manage this? Now, let's first look at the stakeholders. Your human stakeholders, interesting enough, is not just your employees. Your human stakeholders, the way you now look at your business ecosystem, you look at every human that's inside your ecosystem. So your investors, your token holders, your community contributors, your customers, your users, your partners, your employees. So every human that touches your entire value chain in your company is part now of your human stakeholders. And they all become part of it. And I'll show you a little bit on the business model side how those become future co-owners and token holders within the frameworks or the assets or some of your expansion assets or products that you have, as well as your company. So it's a really, really interesting. And then we have the AI agents, your digital twins, your machine APIs. This is all the virtual and digital world that will operate inside your company. And lastly, we'll have the physical infrastructure, right? You'll have your robots, cobots, sensors. You'll have your vehicles, drones, smart infrastructure, etc., which will have intelligence in them. And like I said, can operate by themselves. So the key that we have to figure out is, how do we get these three stakeholders to operate independently, yet aligned to the same mission and the outcome that we want them to achieve? So we as a company say our mission is we want this profitability, sell this product, this world. How do I get all these to make it, sell it, and work aligned? So a lot of people look at that and they say, oh yeah, AI agents, still 3-4 years away. We have time. I want to show you some numbers which I think will scare some people, absolutely, but it's there to really be a red flag, right? You say, listen, this stuff's coming, and this is why I'm saying. So if we then look at an AI agent, right, and the cost around an AI agent, and this video is getting made now. Today is the 18th of December 2025. So currently, it takes 1.3 tokens to produce one spoken word. That's the current cost that we have in the marketplace. A human speaks on average 20,000 words per day, and they think 200,000 words. Now, when ChatGPT 3.0 came out, the cost was $600 per million words to produce a million words. When Grok 4 Fast came out now, the cost now went down to 50 cents, and we'll see that cost reduction more and more. So what does that mean? Let's have a look. If we then want to create a human agent, an AI agent that will speak and act same as a human for an entire year, that will need about 9.5 million words. That cost for that agent to duplicate a human speak for an entire year will cost me $4.75. And this is the scary thing. Now, when companies look at this and they say, listen, do I want to run an agent? It's going to cost me $4.75 per year, and it will do the same function from a speaking point of view. Remember, it's got the intelligence of AI in there, which has scored 100 and all PhD exams. So it's got the intelligence. It's got the ability to then produce, i.e., let's call it digital work or work on computers, $4.75 a year. So this is the thing that I think is getting to a point where companies look at it and saying it's a no-brainer. So the question is, which functions can I already start implementing, and how does it affect my overall company? So what does that mean for humans? So the humans currently are your core operators in your company, right? We're the ones that are producing, we are delivering, and going from there. Then you have your digital components. Digital currently is the support or connectors that connect your ecosystem. And then lastly, where you have your infrastructure. Infrastructure delivers in isolation, right? So it's the machines, it's the products, it's your trucks that are delivering outcomes in isolation. If we look at this new world, the humans now become your AI-assisted orchestration. So they help with the orchestration, implementation, integration of AI. Your AI agents become your autonomous operators. So they take the role that a lot of humans actually performed within your organization. And then lastly, we'll have your intelligent autonomous infrastructure that participates and actually delivers automatically within your organization. So that's intelligence layer plugged across your organization. Now, why are we struggling? Why do we see so many companies struggling to say, where do we start with AI? And the simple reason is it's the structure, right? Most of our companies still use the same structure we used in the industrial age, where we have a CEO at the top, we then have a management layer below that, which then, filters the message down, the vision down, and then the direction down. Then you have middle management, senior, and it goes down through these corporations and eventually touches the clients. The issue you had with your large corporations that don't have a flat management structure is that as they start operating and your clients start giving you feedback, what we tend to see is that your middle management in this layer starts making career decisions, not company decisions, which means is they stop taking risks because it stops their growth within the company or growth ladder in this company. They stop wanting exposure. They don't want to make a mistake, so they don't make any actions. If there's negative news, they don't want that news to filter up. So what you have is the slowness that starts happening, and something has to really go wrong for the top management to say, hang on, there's a problem here. But just think about the time that's getting wasted. So we see the structure has to change. So if we then look at what the new structure looks like, this is what a future company looks like. The CEO becomes the signal caller, and your three stakeholders, as I mentioned, your humans, your digital stakeholders, and your machine, then connected through 9 platforms. And I'll go through these platforms in detail now, and I'll show you what that means. But the key is your protocol systems layer becomes your foundation that drives your entire operation. But you can see we're moving away from that structure where everything's all connected, everything's decentralized, and the connection, the message is coming back real time as it goes through that. So this is how companies will transform, right? So we'll move from a layered command and control type system to a full distributed, self-orchestrated, intelligent organism that's working. So think of it like a human body, right? It's all connected. If I touch my finger, my entire body knows that something's touched my finger. That's the future organizations we're talking about, right? Centralized decision making will go to real-time augmented responsiveness. Fixed roles and manual workflows will go to fluid, autonomous, hybrid AI execution. As an example, your AI agents, once the protocol has been set and the outcome is set and the task is set, those AI agents aren't coming back for permission. They can't coming back for a weekly meeting. They're not going to come back and saying, listen, can I? They'll just keep on executing on that protocol layer as long as that protocol and that outcome has been set. And that's the key that we have to design that will really empower you and accelerate your growth. Top-down communication, this becomes real-time, bidirectional, as I said, connected everywhere. And you'll see that, so you can see we're moving. Total framework or structures of our organizations are changing. So what does that mean from a business model point of view? And I use the old triangular structure to explain business models. Just makes it simple and easy to just see how it starts changing through time. So let's then take each of these, and I'll go through these first ones pretty quickly, and I'm going to look at what the business model looked like through these phases, and then we're going to look at what this omni-sentient economy looks like. So let's start off with the initial business model, pre-internet age, and it was very, very simple. I had a company, I had a product, which was basically a single sale linear type company. I made a product, I had a distribution network, wholesalers, brokers, distributors, and they then offered that to my client. And it typically went through a physical reseller network or through a storefront. And that's how my products got moved. And it was a pretty simple. I made products, my distributor sold products, and then obviously the clients bought those products. Then we moved into the internet economy, and we started seeing some new phrases come through, right? We started seeing a data economy where data started becoming valuable. We started seeing freemium, right? Freemium model, which means I'll make it to you free of charge, but you became the product. Your usage and how you use that became the product and became valuable. Your distributed network and distributing channels still stayed the same. And on the client side, resellers or a storefront was the major, and then some of them started getting an internet front, and I started showcasing my stuff through internet. So you had brick and click, online retailers, etc. That moved us into the collaborative age, which, remember what I said, is this changed our service models. We started seeing as a service appear. We started seeing reoccurring revenues. We started seeing a lot of companies make a lot of money through actual servicing. We started seeing online distributors, very, very large online distribution houses. We started seeing large distribution. This is the Amazons and those significant stores. And then the shift that took place here, the internet became the prime distribution methodology, right? And some of them had stores. So now suddenly companies or shops out there or business owners or distributors owners had internet, but not all of them had a storefront. And we started going to an online marketplace. Significant change. that moved us into where we are now, the hyper-connected economy. And the big shift that took place is that we moved from an internet to a platform economy. And the key was there's bi-directional communication, where we weren't just having something on a website. We now were platform-based, where we could see what the clients were. The clients are communicating with us. We have bi-directional communication, which makes it super powerful. I'll show you some examples. And then we went to a virtual distributed marketplace. And then the successful companies, right, that are really unlocking this, took these two legs and combined them, which means they were becoming the product manufacturer or the product producer, but they also combined this virtual distributed marketplace, and the same company that makes it now touches the client. And that's these major successful companies out there, right? So we saw companies like an Apple that said, I'm going to launch an app store because I want to touch my clients, and every app that sits on my phone will be sold through me. If you look at a company on the contrary, as an example, a very successful company, Samsung, said, now I'm going to get Android to own my user community on my phones, not Apple. So give you an example, right? So that's just two companies, very similar, and the one's a $3 trillion company today, and the other one's about a $500 million company, right? So you can see the shift. That's just business model, and we see that across multiple. We see that with Tesla and BYD. And we see that with multiple different areas. So the key was the companies that really became successful, the companies that were able to combine these two in the current hyper-connected economy. But that's now. Now the question is, how do we move now from here into the omni-sentient economy, which is that next economy? What do we do about that? Right. And that's this shift. So to look at that, we have to look at what are the components. So firstly, on the hyper-connected economy, we were connecting humans and devices, right? That became the key. How do I connect with my users that is using my product? How do I get that intelligence back? And how can I then basically build my business on top of that? So think about Amazon, how Amazon transitioned their business. They went from a company that sold products to a company that became a facilitation to connect clients with products, and super successful. And then we moved into what we call the machine economy, right? Where we now can connect AI agents with autonomous systems. And what do we need? So the question that we need to look at from a company point of view, how do I run this company? What was the foundational key to run this? And most of you, or a lot of you, have already made that shift. But what do I need in addition to add this to my business? Because you're going to have to run both these at the same time. So firstly, on the hyper-connected economy, there was two key platforms you needed within your business. You needed your transactional platform, and then you needed your community, the platform that touched your end consumers to have that intelligence come back. But with this new one, we need additional 7 platforms. So the new company structure, you need 9 platforms to operate this new company. And I'll show you what that stack looks like in a second. So if we look at the stack, why do we need 9? The first one is going to be your foundational and your protocol layer. So think about it. This is where you set out what the outcomes are. Where do I want to do? It sets the rules for your digital agents, sets the rules for your intelligent equipment, sets the rule for your humans, related to what is the rule, what is the framework, where do we want to go, what's the outcomes we want to achieve. That then feeds into your next layer, which is going to be your intelligence execution layer. That's your execution platform and your AI data marketplace. That unlocks all these new business models, and we'll show that in a second. Then we move into what we call the coordination or the commerce layer. That's your services mesh and your transaction platforms sit at this layer. And then we move into your digital twin. Why digital twin is so important in this new economy, it becomes your simulation layer. So now you, with all your connected ecosystem, your digital twin on a decision can run 1,000 simulations and come back and saying, there's your risk, don't do that, do that. Within seconds, within an hour, half an hour, because it's AI driven. So your digital twin becomes that simulation layer, becomes super important. And then only now we get the platforms that touch our clients or the autonomous transactions that are taking place on that side. So that's the stack of the 9 platforms and how they work in unison. Right. So what does that mean from a business model point of view? So hyper-connected now, as I said, most of you have done this shift probably, or have done some of this. So on this one, your focus were IoT integration into your company, your smart digital equity, saying, how do I create that? Smart contracts, and then of course your community centric, as I said, how do I touch my users? And that unlocked all these business models. As a service business model, co-ownership, digital equity, circular economy, and you can look at that and you look at this and say, oh, I have my company company haven't unlocked any, or maybe one or two of these, but we still haven't done all of them. And as I said, a lot of companies still figuring out this economy, and we have to start shifting into or adding this new machine-to-machine economy to our companies. Now, what does it mean on this side? On this side, your focus now becomes AI agents, robots, and machines become market participants. So they are now going to become part of the ecosystem. So think about a marketing thing, right? You're currently building a marketing campaign, or let's say a PR message out there. Are you positioning your PR message for humans? Or are you already accounting for that? Listen, my PR message also needs to have a message to AI. Because within the next year or 18 months, AI is going to be the biggest consumer in the marketplace looking at marketing data. So am I positioning myself to sell to AI, and my agents and my autonomous infrastructure deal, operate, and work with AI out there? And that's the question mark. Then we get to device-to-device and AI transactions, and trust value layer becomes key, which means everything's blockchain driven, right? Now, business model. This is where it really, really gets interesting. So now, as I said, your machines negotiate, transaction, optimize on their own. So they're going to go and do that by themselves. But your self-governing platforms, this is where it really gets interesting, and distributed ownership. And where it gets interesting is going to be the token industry. Token industry will be everywhere across all industries, including companies, right? So we'll see companies move away from IPOs into ICOs as an example, because they can sell a coin offering to anybody anywhere in the world without a lawyer, without a contract, as an example. And it's proof. The proof statement is there that someone owns it. That ownership can get traded and sold. If a government wants to build a new toll road, very simple, tokenize half that asset. Where real world asset tokenization is what we call it, and then your infrastructure cost on the front end basically goes to zero. Think about a data center. You can build a data center, say I want to own this data center. I want to reduce the cost on this, my front-end capital input cost. I'm going to take 50% of this data center. I'm going to tokenize that, and which means I own my data center. My book's at zero value or zero input cost, and I get tokenized. The key is this: anything you tokenize will have to be revenue generating. So the token holder now has an asset. He's got a share in something that he can sell and trade, and that goes up in value. But he also gets a monthly stipend as this asset generates revenue. Think about a toll road. Generates revenue, it keeps on paying this token holder its portion of that. So we'll see that that's going to change the role of banks, etc., in the future. Then you get your digital twin, as I just said, what that looks like from a simulation layer to synthetic layers, etc. So, and we'll look at this in a little bit more detail in a second. Right. So the question then is, what are the verticals of the new business model for the Omni-Sentient? We have 6 verticals. This is why it gets real complicated, right? So the first one is we have our machine-to-machine, AI-to-AI business models, right? And we'll look at the actual components of that in a second. So this is where autonomous systems transact, negotiate, and optimize directly. So how do you put that in place for your company? Number 2 is my physical digital convergence models. This is where infrastructure itself becomes intelligent, responsive, and monetized. So think about that. Your data layer now becomes another revenue stream, right? So which means is you built a system where you have the intelligent connectivity, but you might not want to monetize it. You'll partner with someone to come in and monetize that for you. Then you have your platform intelligence exchange models. This is where intelligence and not just data services become units of trade. Then you move into your human collaborative business models. This is where humans orchestrate value while AIs execute. So think about this, right? Your AI will execute your outcome, your product, and your delivery, but your humans will interact, as I said earlier, with these models. And then we have your social and collaborative intelligence models. This is where communities network. So the question we have is, in a post-labor economy, or as AI starts doing more and more work, what do humans do? And with the sense is that humans will form more and more and belong more and more to communities, right? And there is going to be a transaction of value that takes place there. How do I contribute to the community I belong to? And how do I get rewarded for that contribution? And that's where all that will take place. And then last one is going to be your emerging meta models that are there. So that's your future structures, so we're thinking about the virtual world out there and the whole transaction and all the business ecosystem that'll come with that. So if we then look at the actual components that are inside those, now this is now where you'll see the actual models that will do business inside these components. So if we look at machine to machine and AI to AI, you have your autonomous transaction network, your AI brokered marketplaces, your self-optimized supply chains, and your data as a service currency. So you say, this one absolutely applies to my business. I want to run this one. You'll see. So not all 6 will apply to all businesses, right? So the key for you is to say, looking at my company, looking at my growth, looking at my product, where I want to go, how I want to change my business model. These are the ones I'm going to actually execute and run within my company. So then you'll go into the physical convergence models where you'll have infrastructure as an organism, as I said, where it's intelligence infused, and if you can have your input cost on energy basically close to zero, which means your productivity is optimized. Energy and carbon tokenization models, and then your digital twin driven economy, and then you'll go into your intelligence models, which is your knowledge intelligence. I won't go through. I'm not going to read all these through, but the key becomes each of these then have specific components that unlock the revenue streams within that. Now you can start seeing the convergence, right? You can start seeing that I'm gonna touch on my consumers. I'm gonna drive a product there with intelligence back. That intelligence that come back from that product generates additional revenue, or has the potential to generate additional revenue for me, monetized by my partners. But you can see the complexity of what this model now looks like. So if we then look at what the framework looks like, where we end up with, we have our stakeholders, as I said. So think about your humans. You have your leaders, employees. These are your human network. Then you have your AI network, and then you have your physical ecosystem. So those are your 3 stakeholders I showed you earlier on. Then you have your platforms that then sit, those 9 platforms that sit around the side. And then finally we have our components and our business models and transaction models that sit inside that. But you can see how the ecosystem becomes connected, integrated, and then operate as a single ecosystem. So timelines, as I said. So we're managing 3 timelines. The one is between now and 2030, next 5 years, and 25 is nearly done, but 25 to 2030, where we say AI intelligent agents. Where do I put those in my company? Where do I implement them? How do I add them to my current workforce? Think about $4.75 again, digital platforms, your algorithm workflow, and then your digital currency. Nothing stops you right now to implement these. So there's no restriction. There's no technology restriction. There's nothing saying, listen, I can't, because there's still this technology shortage. Now, when we look at the next one, the physical transformation, this is where we still have a technology shortage. This is where we still have a physical infrastructure, not a technology shortage, but infrastructure shortage, which means is we're still waiting for, as an example, solid state batteries to mature. We can't go and make 500 million robots today. We don't have enough resources. So we have resource restrictions on the physical transformation. That's why we're seeing a longer timeline until 2038. But that's your clean energy transition that'll happen. Reason for that is optimize cost and efficiency, right, and profitability. Advanced infrastructure for robotics, that will become more and more mature, much faster than what people think. And then autonomous infrastructure will drive everything. So the first one will redefine how business is done. This will rewrite the physical foundations of our economy. And then the last one is going to be what I call bridge technologies. That is from now until 2038. So these are things that you're going to have to implement to make these 2 top ones work, right? So you have your AI IoT edge integration. So how are you going to put AI intelligence on your edge to start giving you that data back, to start giving you the intelligence you need to actually drive your business forward, right? Then, so think about, as an example, Tesla built phenomenal electric cars. They put them on the road, put FSD in there. When AI came out and Elon Musk said, I'm going to put AI at the edge within these cars, it transformed the industry. And it's going to absolutely accelerate autonomous driving much, much, much quicker because of that intelligence. But that's that AI intelligence on the edge that you're putting in there. Then you have your blockchain Web3 infrastructure, your coordination platforms. So this is then the key thing, once again, that you'll go through. As an example, coordination platform, whether you have one robot in your business that need to be integrated, or you have a 500,000, doesn't matter. You need an integration platform to run those. But those are 3 timelines that every company, every organization is going to have to manage. Right. So very simple. In action, so you can look at this and saying, I have time, don't have to do anything right now. And the irony is this, as I say, inaction doesn't kill you fast. It'll just erase you slowly. So the key is, when I talk to governments, the phrase there is, you become irrelevant. because water will flow downhill, right? So that's a simple. Money will flow downhill. So the key is, how are you equipping yourself to be ready for this shift that is taking place within your company, so that you are relevant for this future economy?